Just what is a constitution? We've been talking about constitutions, but do you actually know what a constitution is? Or what legislation is? Or how they differ from each other? Well, legislation means laws, and laws change, sometimes with each generation. Traffic laws that worked in horse and wagon days aren't right for times with fast automobiles and planes. Our Constitution, however, is made up of super laws, which are not meant to be easily changed. The Constitution has gone from the time of candlelight into the age of rockets with only a few changes. How come? Because a constitution, a good constitution, is just a basic plan that helps people to live together in peace and happiness. It provides a way for people to make everyday laws and enforce them. Laws change with the times. A good constitution shouldn't need much changing. Why don't you make a constitution for your classroom or your home? Remember, you have adults and children who need to agree to this constitution. Should each have an equal vote? Can you have a perfect democracy, or isn't that suitable? How will you balance power? Who gets to make the laws? Everyone? One person? The teacher? A chosen few? What happens to anyone who breaks a law? Does a visitor have to obey rules? Suppose you want to change your constitution. How would you do that? Will your constitution be easily respected if it can be easily changed? The Constitution writers ask those same kind of questions. But as you can imagine, when you write a constitution for a big country, you have a lot of organizing to do, especially if you want to be fair. And more than anything else, the men who wrote our Constitution wanted to be fair. One of the nice things about our Constitution is that it's not terribly complicated. You won't find it as exciting as Tom Sawyer, but if you read it carefully, you will understand it. It is that simplicity that has helped make the Constitution so lasting. The delegates to the Constitutional Convention came up with a Constitution that is still great more than 200 years after it was written. No other country has ever had a governing document that has worked so well for such a long time. One of the first things that the delegates decided on was a name for the new country. The convention officially adopted the name the United States of America. Then the delegates agreed to a three-part government with legislative, executive, and judicial branches. That was part of Madison's Virginia plan. It was based on the English plan of government. A legislature is a lawmaking body, a Congress or Parliament. Our Congress is divided up into two groups called houses. They are the Senate and the House of Representatives. An executive is a leader, a president or king. The judiciary is the courts. In the United States, they go from town courts all the way to the Supreme Court. Since the delegates were afraid of power, the three branches were planned to check and balance each other. They actually used that phrase, check and balance. Think about what it means. They expected each branch to keep the others in check, to stop them from going too far and overstepping the limits of their authority. And balance? Well, no branch was supposed to be stronger than any other. The president was made commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy, but was not given the power to declare war. Only Congress can do that. That was one way to balance power. Power was balanced between the states and the national government. The national government controls foreign affairs, business between the states, and the post office. The states control schools, roads, and local government. Congress was given the power to impose taxes. Control of money is an important power. Organizing the details of the three branches took a lot of time. The delegates argued over everything. Hamilton wanted the president to be like a king. Edmund Randolph wanted a committee of three to act as president. Ben Franklin wanted a legislature with only one house. They voted 60 times before they could agree on the way to select the president. How would the legislatures and the judges be elected or appointed? How long would they serve? What would they be called? Those questions needed to be answered. Someone suggested the president be called Your Mightiness. Do you know what the president is called? Our Constitution was the work of sensible men who didn't think our leaders needed fancy titles. They were the students of government. Almost all of them had done a lot of reading and studying. Most had served in their state legislatures. They had helped write their state constitution. They disagreed on many things, but on two ideas, all agreed. They wanted to guarantee basic human rights and freedom, what Jefferson called inalienable rights. Same thing with John Locke. They wanted to provide government by consent of the governed. That means that they expected the people to govern themselves through their representatives. Those don't seem like unusual goals to us today, but they were unusual in the 18th century. No nation had ever done what those men hoped to do. England had come closest, but the men who were writing our Constitution, the framers, knew all about the problems in England in times when the king had too much power and in other times when Parliament had too much power. Finally, the delegates solved the problem of power in two ways, with checks and balances, as I just told you, and by making the Constitution more powerful than any president, Congress, court, or state. They made the Constitution the supreme law of the land. None of the three branches is allowed to break its rules. But the Constitution isn't a rigid, unbending document. Those very wise framers made it flexible. They came up with a way of changing the Constitution in order to adapt it to new times and new ideas. The Constitution can be changed by amendments. However, the framers made it hard to do that. They didn't want people to change the Constitution just to keep up with passing fads. Amendments must be approved by Congress and by the people in their state legislatures. 2/3 of the members of Congress need to vote for an amendment for it to be approved, and 3/4 of the state legislatures must ratify it. So far, 10,000 amendments have been suggested to our Constitution. Only 26 have been approved. Good as it was, the new Constitution wasn't perfect. The delegates made a few bad mistakes. Thank goodness for that amendment process. It would help to correct them.